All right. Terrific. Thanks so much for joining us today, Kara. It's really an honor, and Kara's just joined us fresh from the airport. Yeah. Hopefully doing okay. And thank you to all of you for being here. This has really been kind of a dream come true for our team. We had this vision years ago of creating 50/50, bringing together people to talk about these important topics. So thank you for joining. First, a little bit more about Kara. In addition to being the most influential journalist in the tech industry, from the start of the internet to today, she's reported for publications like the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times. She's interviewed everyone from the early days with Steve Case and Jerry Yang to today with Zuckerberg and Elon Musk. She's also an entrepreneur, founding Recode Media, the author of multiple books with a memoir on the way, and a podcast Trailblazer with top podcasts like Pivot, Recode Decode, and Sway. And on top of all of that, something that we have in common is that she's a parent to 4 children. That's right. Very impressive.
Hi, everybody. How you doing? Including you noisy people off to the right. That's all right. I would say shut the fuck up, but that would be so American of me.
That would be amazing.
Yes. I don't want you to think Americans are terrible.
So, which brings us to the point. In your career, you've often been kind of fearless, just speaking your mind.
Yes.
Often kind of spotting things before everyone else can see them. So early in your career, you started reporting just on, my understanding, on retail for Washington Post, but you saw this new thing called the internet and started focusing on that. You got into podcasting really early when no one else was really thinking about it. I think it'd be really great to learn more about that, about, how did you have this instinct of seeing the opportunity, and then also how did you get the courage to actually pursue that? A lot of people have great ideas that they never actually see through.
I think one of the things that's important in life is, I don't know why I'm the way I am. Some people are shy, some people are not shy. I'm not particularly shy. But one of the things that I've spent a lot of time doing as a reporter is, there's an expression which is kind of getting a workout right now, which is that you see, you should believe what you see rather than see what you believe. And I think most people operate in they see what they believe rather than the other way around. And so one of the things I've been very good at is calling it like I see it, which is sort of a trope and a cliche. But one of the things that's really important is wherever you are in life to understand that, 1, everything changes, 2, that you have to pay attention to these changes, and you have to be realistic about their chances without being too cynical or too much of a fanboy. And so when I started covering tech, it was largely men, and they just essentially loved to lick all the tech leaders up and down, and thinking that they were gods. We're back in that phase right now with Elon and Jeff Bezos and others. But I met them when they weren't so fantastic, and so I have a different relationship. So I spent a lot of time sort of judging them fairly without snarking at them, and at the same time being honest about what they're talking about and why we're listening to them on important issues. Like right now, we have this thing going on in the U.S. with Elon trying to buy Twitter. It looks like he's not going to buy it. I think he was serious, but in the way Elon Musk is serious, which is not very serious. And so I spent a lot of time, since I've known him, to be pretty fair to him, which people who are his fanboys think is mean, and people who hate him, which he has equal numbers of those, think is not mean enough, I guess. So I try to sort of be truthful to what's happening in front of me.
And so when you were starting your career of looking at tech, I find, I worked for 10 years in Silicon Valley before coming to Germany, and I know there can be this kind of elitism if you don't come from a tech background yourself, you didn't study computer science.
Yeah.
Did you ever encounter that? And then how did you get up to speed on all the,
I mean, there is an element of overt sexism in Silicon Valley, but that's a different story. But I think the thing is, if you're highly technical, of which it's mostly men, and white men mostly, and so not all, but mostly, that you have you're higher on the station of where you belong. And so I spend I understand the business more than anything, and so it's sort of like you don't really have to understand necessarily how, unless you can talk to people who understand it, how a car works to cover the auto industry. Same thing with pharmaceuticals and other. It helps you to have some expertise, but it's more important to understand the business of it. Like what's going on in crypto, I could not explain to you how the blockchain works, but I do understand finance, and so I'm able to write about it pretty intelligently.
Yeah. And what you touched upon brings us to our topic of 50-50, of this predominance of white men in leadership
What does
positions.
50-50 stand for?
Advocating for more equal leadership.
Yeah, that's not going to happen, unfortunately. I'm sorry to tell you.
More women in leadership.
It's like 8%, 92 right now in funding. It's 1% now in leadership. It's 100% zero in wealth, maybe 0.2. Mackenzie Bezos is carrying a lot of the weight on that one, and Melinda Gates, and maybe Lorraine Powell Jobs, but mostly it's not 50-50 by any stretch.
Yeah, we have a ways to go. And I think in Germany, at least, they've done a bit of experimenting with quotas for board membership, and there's a lot of discussion about what kind of policies can we implement to force companies to make some of these changes.
Yeah, they're not going to do it without you forcing them.
Yeah.
They won't.
I mean, and it can seem like such a macro problem. Do you see any kind of micro solutions, specific things that companies or that individuals can do to try to change this dynamic?
Well, I like you said, I have 4 children. I have 3 sons and 1 daughter. And so I always think of a really famous Frederick Douglass quote, which is it's more useful to raise strong men than fix broken ones later. And I think one of the part is raising men in our society to understand that. Not to blame them, because I don't want my sons to feel constantly blamed or feel like they're under siege. But one of the things that's important is for them to pick up their heads and look around at what they have and the kind of advantages they get over others. And so I spent a lot of time, pointing out the problems with the lack of diversity. And what I'd like to do is focus more on how companies aren't as good if they're not diverse. And there's tons and tons of studies. And if you appeal to their greed, which is always helpful, or appeal to logic that it's a better company, you have better products, and point to the problems that are created because the issues of safety on the internet are because most people who design the internet never felt unsafe a day in their lives.
Right.
And so that's why and then they can go on about free speech without thinking about, and I understand that, I get it, but these people aren't unsafe, and so they don't understand what that means. And so, so giving people a sense of empathy and raising them to understand it. And if you have to force them at the beginning, I don't care, I have to force my teenagers to clean up their room, and somehow the message gets through. It's just, they're not going to do it on their own because they're more comfortable with people that look and feel like themselves. So I think that's a great thing. We're never going to do that in the U.S., but it works on all kinds of things here, I think.
Or peer pressure? Is there
No.
a chance with, for instance, that institutional investors like universities or unions that might say, we're not giving money to the VC?
No, because they have the upper hand. These creators have the upper hand, and you can't make them do anything. If if you've seen the recent behavior of Elon during this Twitter things, he said something about bots, which is entirely a canard in order. He's trying to get out of the deal, so he's making things up. No, there's a problem with bots. There's no question. So he picked the most reasonable problem. And then the head of Twitter actually did a very thoughtful, let me show you the data, and he posted a poop emoji as his response. And so that kind of gives you an insight into the juvenility and the they don't want to do it, they won't do it.
Yeah.
They'll post poop emojis when they're trying to do a major $40 billion deal. So,
Yeah, I've been very
funny.
struck with the Twitter deal that he sees free speech in very black and white terms.
Yes, he does.
To that point of
Yeah.
never having felt this marginality of that he doesn't see the
It
great.
doesn't impact him, and so he can't even possibly imagine what other people are impacted like. So, like, for example, you were talking about free speech. What do you do about this shooter in Buffalo with the video up? Do you take it down? Do you not take it down? Do you leave his manifesto up? Do you not? It's a lot more complex when you get out into the wild versus not. When you can just sit around and say everybody should be able to say anything, but should someone be able to broadcast murder? Is that illegal? I don't know. It's free speech. There's a Texas law right now where they kind of have to leave it up. It's not clear. And the Texas lawmakers say, well, in that case you don't, but it doesn't say it in the law. And so who decides what case it is? And I think that's what the difficulty of it is. The only thing you'd be certain about is that there's going to be murderers who do this. Otherwise, you have to assume that you have to make difficult decisions all the time.
Going back to what companies themselves can be doing, and have you seen particular companies that you would hold up as a model that you think have gotten it right? And
yeah, I think there's a couple. There's a lot. I mean, I think Airbnb is one I think of a lot. Now, they have a lot of controversies around housing and et cetera, people having enough affordable housing. But I think in general, he has always been thoughtful about when problems come up, whether it was what happened with the neo-Nazi marches in Charlottesville or anywhere else. And so I think he's always learning and evolving as a person and tends to, not that there isn't problems, but when they come up, he's thoughtful about dealing with them. He doesn't hide from them. I think he's a really interesting leader. I actually think the Snapchat CEO is another one. Evan Spiegel, who started off as kind of a bro, kind of an unrepentant bro, he's really evolved over the years and has really become thoughtful about his product design. The founder of Instagram, another very thoughtful person. They're all over the place. It's not all kind of 12-year-old boys throwing poop at each other. It's not. Yeah.
And do you see that internally in the companies also? I mean, a lot of
yeah, I mean, no. Again, running companies is really difficult today, and post-pandemic, it's going to become even harder because there's all these different expectations now. The whole world has changed. And so I do see some of the practices at places like Airbnb. Apple is another company. Microsoft, incredibly, has changed really drastically. And so a lot of companies have become, have shown the way where you could have both profits and issues. Now, every one of them has their issues. Apple has the App Store monopoly, which in Europe they're dealing with it. They also have China, but at the same time, they're for privacy and everything else. I think it's that you, at least when there are problems presented, you don't shirk from your responsibility, and that's what I think is important.
And what role do you think the media can play in kind of broadening the understanding about making women more visible? You know, I've heard of certain initiatives where media organizations will, count the number of women who are interviewed for stories or different things like that.
Well, we wrote about it a lot when I was running Recode. We spent a lot of time. It's because I was the editor, and so I insisted on it. And one of the things I like to do is point it out all the time. And one year, many years ago, I wrote a piece called "The Men and No Women of Facebook." This is before Sheryl Sandberg, who apparently has to represent 16 women on the leadership. She doesn't. But she's, they didn't have any women on the main staff. So all I did is run their pictures. That's all. And they got mad at me for doing that. I'm like, it's your staff. I'm just making it visible. I did a similar thing at Twitter when they had a board that was 10 of the same kind of white man. And I don't have a problem with white men. I just think there shouldn't be 10 of them on the board of a very diverse company that makes products for lots of people. And they seem to think it was somehow an accident that happened. And I wanted to point out, how did this happen? Mathematically, it seems impossible. And so I spent a lot of time just saying, look at this, boards which you can find a lot of women, people of color, different political diversity. They should have had a conservative on Twitter's board for years, and they didn't, because you need that point of view in the boardroom, and then they wouldn't be accused of all this stuff now. And so I wrote a piece which you couldn't do in the Wall Street Journal where I previously worked, where I said, you may not get this joke, but I wrote a piece that said, the board of Twitter, which has 3 Peters and a Dick, which that was their names, actually.
Yeah, Dick Costello.
I was making a penis joke, but as the editor, I was able to approve it. So I approved a joke. I thought the writer did a great job.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people in positions of power at these media companies should do that, should have a point of view. And I think a lot of journalists try to shirk from a point of view after doing reporting. I don't. I do a lot of reporting, and then I come to a conclusion, and then I say it. Now, you can say I'm an idiot or not, but I think I do I'm pretty accurate. Things turn out the way, after I do the reporting or have some knowledge. And so I think media has to have a point of view, and again, not feel scared to say it. They often feel scared to say it because they get attacked, but I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, do you think it's that they're under pressure from advertisers or just under pressure from their readership?
No, they're just scared. I think they're scared to get attacked on Twitter for some reason. Media is obsessed with Twitter. I don't care. I don't care if some Russian bot wants to call me a bitch. I don't care. You know what I mean? I think you have to do really good work, and I think that's the most important part. If you do really good work and it proves itself out year after year, you become a trusted person for a real audience of people who trust what you have to say. If you're not, if you're just pontificating or just talking off the top of your head, people are onto that really quickly, and you're not successful.
Yeah, and that is kind of part of your overall persona is that you're not afraid to have these tough conversations.
No.
Not afraid to just ask direct questions.
Yeah. Of anybody. Like, I just did an interview with Jon Stewart, who's a very popular talk show. He started everything off. Everybody who's come since worked for Jon Stewart. And he just has a new show on Apple, which I didn't think was very good. And so I said it. He goes, what do you think? And most celebrities are used to, oh, great job. I'm like, not so good. And he was like, really? I'm like, yeah, does nobody tell you? And then we went through it, and then I ended up talking about relevancy, what happens when you lose relevancy. As it turned out, he loved to talk about it because he knew it himself, that he's struggling with creating his next thing, and he appreciated that someone had the guts to say, not so good. I interviewed Simone Sanders. Again, people who I actually have probably would be more supportive of. She was a former Kamala Harris press secretary, and she just started a show on MSNBC. She's a very interesting woman of color, and I said, and most people would have sort of softballed her, and I said, can you ever cover the Biden administration with any kind of integrity because you work there, and how do you do that? And I think she appreciated the question, because that's obvious. If you work for someone, how can you cover them? I didn't say she couldn't. I just wanted to ask how she thinks about that. And so I think people appreciate the obvious question that people are thinking of, and not in a mean way. I don't think that was mean. I think that's what people are talking about. I also asked her about ratings, which hadn't been very good. And I think most people, gloss over things that are just, the numbers are the numbers. And I wanted to know how she was going to become popular.
Is there someone in your life that can tell you that also?
Oh, my kids. all my, especially my 17-year-old.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of opinions. Yeah, my kids.
But how did you just always have kind of the clear-headedness and the kind of no-holds-barred gumption to just come out directly with that? Yeah.
I think it's really important that, again, there's a thing that you do, which I think I like, that I have a reputation for being fair. I don't think fair means you have to, be extraordinarily kind. You want to get the answers. And I think my whole presentation is that smart people want smart questions. Like Steve Jobs, everyone was scared of him. I was like, I'm not scared of you. Why are they scared of you? And they shouldn't be. It was unfair to him. And so he liked tough questions because he's smart. And so he's bored when people ask softball questions or, hostile questions. He's annoyed by that. And so I come into it, I'm like, I'm really actually want to understand whatever the topic was. And one year he told us he was never going to make a phone, right? He said, I'm never going to make a phone.
Famous last words.
And the next year, he made a phone, obviously, which has become the most important item. It's in my pocket here. And so the next year when I interviewed him, I was like, you absolutely lied to us. Just lied. Because it was, of course, it was in process.
Yeah, that doesn't happen.
And he goes, yes, I did. And I said, you're a liar then, you admit. And he's like, yes, I'm a big liar. And I wanted to lie because I didn't want to tell you. And so it was great. It was like, you know, I don't know. It just seemed like obvious.
But in order to kind of come in with that confidence and these type of questions, you have to do a lot of preparation and
sort of.
feel,
Yeah.
How do you prepare yourself for these interviews?
What I'm interested in, like I did, whatever I happen to be interested in at that moment of the thing. It doesn't have to be what other people are interested in. You know, I really, like, I sometimes want to interview, when I was interviewing the CEO of Parler at the day of the January 6th attack, I was emotional. I was a couple miles from the Capitol. I was pissed off. They let Donald Trump stay on for so long. And I said this to him. I was like, this, and you did nothing. You look at there's instance after instance of planning. And for some reason, he decided to tell the truth and said, yeah, we don't care if this happens. You know, which got him fired. It ultimately got him fired. Mm-hmm. But I think I was very clear where I was coming from, so I wasn't trying to be sneaky. I'm like, I think this was one of the causes, or helped accelerate what was happening there. And I think, even though he got fired, I think he appreciated my honesty to him. Same thing when I'm interviewing anybody. Like, I say what I think, and then they can react to it or not. And sometimes it changes my mind if they have a good argument. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't think I have to be, I don't consider them someone I want to fight. I just would like to know, I would like them to tell the truth. A good example is when I interviewed Travis Kalanick, who is the head of Uber. He was wasn't the founder, but he was very critical.
It's now a TV show.
What? Yeah, this is a TV show. The We Crashed one is better, but I was interviewing him, and I said, you know, I can do math, and your economics don't work. It just doesn't work. Your math doesn't work on your stuff, and it still doesn't work today, by the way. If you continue to do the math, it doesn't work. And so he said, yeah, I know. And I said, it doesn't work. I don't think you're ever going to be profitable. I don't think there's any way you can make this profitable. He goes, there's a way. He goes, what we got to do is get rid of the guy in the front seat who we have to pay. We need him gone. Like, he told the truth. That's an awful thing to say. All the people who brought us we're going to someday replace with a robot or autonomous cars. And he said, we got to get rid of the guy in the front seat, because once we get rid of him, we're going to make a ton of money. And I was like, thank you. You told the truth there. Yeah. You're an awful human being, but you told the truth. And he goes, you're welcome. And I said, you're still an asshole. And so it was great. It was a great conversation. I appreciated him telling the truth.
But that's also a unique talent, to get people to open up in that way. And
yeah, but you don't. You just have to ask the
almost
direct
like
question.
They want to impress you, and
no, they want to tell the truth. Remember I'm going to see the Top Gun premiere in London later this week. I really hate myself for liking Tom Cruise as much as I do, because I think on some level he's a very strange individual, but on a lot of levels, not just some. And there's a
special edition aviators.
Yes, these are. I was first. He was their prescription. You know, when he was in that movie, the movie about the trial, I can't remember that, with Jack Nicholson, he goes, I want the truth, you can't handle the truth. And people can handle the truth. I think about that a lot. Like, we treat people like they can't handle the truth, like children. And I think it's really important to, are those people with backpacks? What do they have on them? Is that beer?
Oh, they have tea.
What?
They want to make sure everyone's refreshed. They have tea backpacks. Tea? Yeah.
See, if that was a Trump rally, they'd be liquor. Anyways.
That's coming later. If you can.
Yeah. I hope this isn't a Trump rally. They're not my audience.
No Trump. No, we're in Europe now.
Yeah. I see enough of it in my family. Anyway, sorry. Anyway, I think people appreciate the truth. I do. And I think even they want to tell it. They want to have a conversation that's real. I just believe it. That's all.
And then do you have advice for, those of us entering a difficult conversation, I think a lot of people have anxiety. You seem very comfortable in that space. So do you have advice about how other people can approach these difficult conversations?
Yeah, I think we self-edit almost constantly, especially women in the workplace. They want to be perceived as nice or getting along, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't care. I don't not care. It's not that. What I mean is that you're not going to get what you want anyway, and it doesn't really help you. It helps you to be nice to people, like why be unnecessarily obnoxious or anything else. But I think sometimes people, they think somehow they're going to gain advantage, and you just don't. You don't gain advantage if you don't say what you think. You just don't. You absolutely don't. And so you know, someone the other day was like, boy, obnoxiousness has worked for you. I said, it's not obnoxious.
Yeah.
Fair point. But it's also really important to say what you think. And if you don't, what I always say to people when they have a decision, you know, I mentor a lot of women especially, and when they're trying to make a decision of, especially young people, they're always young people, you know, with my son, he just turned 20. I have kids from 20 to 6 months right now. But he's like, he took a year off after COVID, and he's like, you know, Mom, I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, you know, I don't know, what should I take this off? Should I want to do this? He's a very good cook. And I hate to say this, I said this to my own kid. I was like, you know what, you're going to be dead in 70 years. Maybe you should. And he was like, you're right. And then he did it. Like, just if you have a sense, Steve Jobs talked about this almost continually. If you have a sense that you have a very limited time on this planet, you can make decisions. So whenever someone can't make a decision, I'm like, you're going to be dead in 50. I sort of estimate, like, you're going to be dead in 30 years or something like that.
Yeah.
Or
love.
they stay on this wheel of achievement that's really exhausting, I think. And you're not going to get what you want. And I don't mean to act like a juvenile. I don't mean to act like a jerk or an asshole. It's that say what you want, and if you don't get it, you don't get it. But if you don't ask, you don't get, I guess.
Yeah,
it's kind of
I
a
love
weird
that.
little way, but not selfishly. There's a selfish way to do that that's just, you know, jerkish that you shouldn't do.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask and they say no, you're still where you were before. You didn't have.
Yes, but see, after that, I keep saying yes, yes. The other thing is, the last thing I give an advice on is to learn to say no at the same time. I'm thinking of writing a book called No is a Complete Sentence. I think a lot of people don't say no enough. They just sort of go along. I always say no. Like, someone's like, this is how we want to do it. And I'm like, no. And they're like, what? I'm like, no. And then like, what do you mean? I'm just, no. I just, no. I'm not going to do it. And I think that in this world where so many people do not have choices, those who do, there's so many people who don't have choices. Frontline workers, people in Syria, like all these places. When you have the privilege of having an ability to make a choice, don't take that for granted. That's all. I just don't. And so it's really important to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to take that opportunity. I'm not going to do what you want. And know what you want, not what you're offered, but what you want to do.
Yeah, and I think that also takes a certain bit of self-reflection to really understand what you do want in order to make those decisions.
Because people go along. It's interesting. Like I think about my kids with homework. I think homework is stupid. I don't think it helps. I don't think it doesn't help. It's dumb. They could be doing other fun things at home or interesting or reading. And so I had a big thing. The teachers finally came to me and said, stop telling your children not to do their friends not to do their homework. And I go, but it doesn't matter. Like, if you do this, and everyone sort of goes along with it for whatever achievement they're trying to get to, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't.
Yeah.
So.
You're going to be dead in 50 years.
It's a wonder my children know how to eat, I guess.
I thought we could close on, related to that, a bit of advice for our audience. I heard in an interview that you said, every time you take a risk, it's a good thing.
Yes.
And that's kind of a remarkable mindset to approach things. Can you talk a little bit about that? When have you taken risks that maybe you had some questions about whether that was the right thing to do? Or were you always certain?
Every job that I've quit or to do something else, every time I had an idea, I tend to do it. Like, I tend to not worry about the repercussions and what I'm leaving behind, because if I always have a today's the day, like, oh, now I'm going to stop doing this. And I do it all. I'm going to do it my rest of my career. When I'm just tired of it, I just don't do it. Oh, maybe I don't want to do this, or maybe I don't want to do that. And so I spend a lot of time like, am I happy with this? And whenever I do something that seems like directionally correct, nothing is, I mean, some things are fatal, like, you know, you shouldn't take dumb risks. But I think most risks are not really risky at all. And it seems like it tends to have some sort of payoff if you instinctually feel like it's a good idea. I mean, I'm literally 100 years old and I just had two more children during the pandemic. And I was like, and someone's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I like kids. And they're like, you're going to be the oldest mom on the playground. I said, I am the oldest mom. Not I'm going to be, I am the oldest mom. And they were like, what are you going to do, when they're in college? I'm like, I'll be in a wheelchair. I don't know.
I'll figure it out.
Figure it out. And so I just think people tend to self-edit in a way that is not very helpful. And if you don't do that, you can often have the same. There are people in this world who are in very precarious positions. Most of us are not among those people. We just aren't. And so it's a thing I always, talk to my sons about whenever they're worried. I'm like, one of them is like, he's going to college, and so he's in that mode, and he's very worried. It's like his friends, they're very like on that wheel, that hamster wheel of achievement.
Right.
And he's 6'4", he's handsome, he's a white guy in America. His other mom worked for Google, so he's got some money. And he's like, I don't know, what if this doesn't work? I'm like, somehow I feel as if you're going to be okay.
You're already at a good starting point.
Yes. He's like, he goes, what if I'm not? I'm like, give me a fucking break, tall white man who plays basketball well. I feel like you're going to be fine. Now, if he had other issues, mental issues, of course I would understand that. But he's in a position of great privilege and luck. And I want him to understand that without feeling guilty about it. And everybody has that in this room who's able to be here. There's other people that aren't. Like, we're not that far from Ukraine. Look what's happening there. It's an existential crisis. Be scared of the things that are scary, and be scared of nothing else.
Right.
That's really the way I look at it.
And then if it happened that your eldest was a girl, a daughter, heading out into the world now, what
I would be more worried.
Yeah.
I think about that. I have a daughter who's 2.5, and I'm watching it very carefully. I'm watching for the day that they tell her she can't. She's very confident. She's got a lot going on. She's a lot of opinions. She's very, very confident, and I am very worried about what happens. Like, how does it get pulled down? I don't think she will, but I think it's definitely, it's going to be an interesting journey with her. I want her to keep the confidence she has now. She likes math. I want her to do math. If she likes this, I want her to think like that. And there are moments when things change. Mm-hmm. For boys, too.
It's usually more subtle. It's not so overt.
What?
It's usually something very subtle.
Yes, it's always little. I remember when one of my sons, we live in San Francisco, raised him there, and he had this pink hat he liked, pink spangle. We live in the Castro. He has to have a pink hat, right? And so he loved it. And then one day he came home, his favorite hat, I still have it. He wants to get rid of it, but I refuse. And he's like, I can't wear this hat anymore. In the Castro of San Francisco. And I said, why? He goes, boys don't wear pink hats. I was like, why? You like it. And I tried all kinds of, pink is the most popular color in India. I kept trying to ways, but something happened to him where he had decided he had to be like a certain way, and it was a sad moment. I remember thinking, what is it that now he had such enjoyment from something and such joy, and then he didn't like it. And I look for those things all the time with my kids, like when they're not being who they are. And I think that's it's the most important thing people can do in this life is raise good kids. I think that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For making
Look, everyone's
time.
quieted down now. Anyway, thank you. So can I ask a question of you guys? How many of you think it's a good idea for Elon to buy Twitter? I'm just taking a poll of the Germans. Oh my God. What? Oh, okay. For him?
For him, well.
Whatever. He'll probably be dating a Hollywood star next. He did date Amber Heard, which is not a good situation right now in the U.S. But so most of you don't think. Do you think it's good for Twitter to own them? Right? So you don't. He's not going to get it now. So it doesn't
Do you
matter.
think right now it's just a bargaining tactic that he's kind of stepping away, trying to get a lower price?
Let me give you a piece of advice on Elon Musk, having met him before he was rich. Everything is a joke. Every single thing he does. He's also a visionary and an amazing entrepreneur. And the stuff he does that's serious is substantive and amazing. And then the other half of him is literally the biggest troll you ever want to meet. And so everything's a joke. So it's hard. It's hard.
It was interesting because when he recently spoke at TED that he said, truth is what is most important to him, which is interesting because
His truth. Let's add a little
Okay.
bit. His truth is what's most important to him. I just think it's, you know, I don't think Twitter's a very big business, so I think it's all a game, and it's a ridiculous game because it's a shitty business. It just occupies the attention. It is. It just is. Just look at the numbers.
Yeah.
And I think it's sad that he's doing this. Because if anybody could change it, he actually is so creative, probably he could, if he wasn't indulging himself in ridiculous poop emojis.
Maybe he doesn't have enough Kara Swishers around to...
Oh, he does. He's not talking to me right now. That's why he hasn't called me back. He's talking to the right-wing boys who...
Yeah.
What's interesting is he's engaging with right-wing people in the country quite a lot, whether they're Mike Cernovich, whatever. There's a right-wing media environment that he's engaging with. And what's most laughable to me is it's as if the cool kid talked to them, and now they're like, he's the best! And I'm like, uh-huh.
Yeah.
Like, he's going to leave you too. He doesn't care about you. And it's an interesting situation there. But everything's a joke. If you understand that about
Yeah.
him. But unfortunately, he could fix it. He actually could make it better. But has decided to just make it a joke, which is too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, time will tell.
He's a lot of fun.
Thank
just
you.
so know.
And
Anyway.
Kara will also be speaking
Yeah.
tomorrow at the conference stage and a couple other stages, Finance Forward. Thank you so much for
Thank
joining.
you,
It's a
Heidi.
pleasure.
Thank you very much.
you.
Thanks, everybody.